Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Deep Take podcast. I am here with podcast manager and producer and host of What's That Pod, where she completely dives in with podcast hosts and dives into their process and their ideas. And it's super freaking cool because I don't really know anyone or many people doing that. So it's freaking awesome. And she also lives in Las Vegas. Um, but she found her love of podcasting through her sister, Jillian, who introduced her to shows like My Favorite Murder, Dolly Parton's America. And then from there, she sort of went down this rabbit hole. So this next guest is Juliana Pedri. And we're going to dive into her journey, her process with podcasting, where it all stems from. We're just going to explore it all. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being open to this. I'm super excited to learn a little bit more about you and what goes on behind these incredible podcast episodes.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate all of that. That was the first time I heard my bio said as how you said it. So I loved how you introduced me. So thank you. I'm really excited to be here as well. And I love what you're doing with your podcast too. So I'm excited.
Yay! Okay, cool. Let's do it. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
So, I know that you said that your sister introduced you to podcasting back in 2016. That's when it
Yeah.
began. So,
Mhm.
can you describe to me what that moment looked like for you? Did it start
Mm.
sometime in childhood? Um, yeah, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So when I first started getting into podcasts, I had no idea what they were at first. And, I never really was into podcasting. It was more YouTube growing up, I was very into. And so what happened was when my sister, she was talking to me about podcasting, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like podcasting because I have an auditory processing disorder. So I felt like I want to be able to understand what people are saying because it's like a lot of, talking and a lot of audio.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought that it would just be too much for me. But then, my sister was really telling me like, hey, you need to listen to this podcast. I feel like it will, you're going out to college. I feel like it will really help you be more observant, which is my favorite murder because it's like they give you so many tips and tricks. And she was saying that, listening to that podcast really helped her become more aware and helped her become more vigilant and what to look out for being on your own. And so, because I was going to college and I was going to be in a completely different state and everything like that, she was like, you need to listen to these guys. So that's kind of how it started. She was more of a podcast listener before me, and
Mm-hmm.
then I started listening to them and I binged their series a lot. And my sister and I were fans of them. And then for Christmas, I surprised her with a podcast live show of the My Favorite Murder for Christmas. So we ended up going to their live show, and then it was great, but I felt like their live show kind of ruined it for me in a little bit, like for their podcast, because they did things a little differently, and it was just like not what I expected really too much, but it was still kind of cool. Um, but since then, I just kind of started, she gave me other recommendations to listen to. You mentioned Dolly Parton's America, and I loved that one because it's more like a journalism podcast, and you get to hear like, she speaks into it, like there's music, there's like it's a whole production. It's really, really cool. And I got into different things like lore and Mile Higher podcast, like all these other ones that, I just started to really love. And I started thinking, how do they come up with podcasts? How is the process behind all of it? So because of my love for it, I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about at the same time doing virtual assisting type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, when I was going through that course, I found out more about how to how to manage a podcast, and then I found other courses and whatnot. So because of podcasting, and really was my initial love for it, turned into like, well, how does it work? And then finding out how it works led me to what I'm doing now. So
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah,
yeah,
when you say that you went down a rabbit hole, you seriously went down a rabbit hole.
yeah,
And how cool is it to like see, a podcast like show happen live, like in person?
yeah,
So I'm kind of curious about that because you said that, you became big fans of these people and then you saw them live and it
yeah.
was like not what you were expecting. Can you kind of talk to me about what what happened, what you saw, and like how maybe why it didn't resonate with you?
Yeah. So going there was really, really fun. Like we made it a whole sister date, right? We had dinner beforehand, and when we were going in, there was, everyone waiting. Their fans are called murderinos.
Oh my God,
So
cool.
yeah, so they're called murderinos, and I think it was like a sold out show, and they had it at the Park MGM in Las Vegas. And so it was fun because we got to like meet other people, like other fans of the show. We got really good seats, and the beginning of it was really cool. And I think my expectations were too high, which kind of made me be like why did they do this type of stuff? Because how the show goes is like, or how their lives usually go is like they would go, hey, this is we're in Las Vegas or whatever. They would talk about the events that happen in Las Vegas, like the murders that happen and like what happened behind them, and the resolutions of everything. And then after that they would go into like a hometown murder where they'll like talk to someone from one of their listeners, and they would read an email about what happened in their hometown, right? And so that's kind of like how I expected it to go. But instead of doing like the Las Vegas like city, they did like they did the Hoover Dam and like Virginia City and like cities that weren't even in Las Vegas. Like it was really weird. I was really upset about it because I'm
Yeah,
like, there's so much stuff that happened in the freaking in the town itself, like in the city. And so I don't know if they did it differently because they were in Vegas before and they were like, let's do places around Vegas, but it just didn't make sense because it's like you're in Vegas. Being in Vegas, there's so many things that happen that are like,
totally.
that you could easily like find a story that hasn't been said before, or I don't know. So
Wow, that sounds like a complete waste of an opportunity because you're in Vegas, so why wouldn't
yeah.
you like, you know, connect that tie with
Mm-hmm.
the audience that's watching? And, that sounds super strange that they wouldn't do
Yeah.
that.
And that's I think why I was like annoyed, because they talked about Virginia City and Hoover Dam, which Hoover Dam is closed. Like that was kind of cool. But it's like they could have, instead of Virginia City, they could have talked about something like here, like I don't know, like a mob story or something. You know what I mean? Like one of those guys. Um, and then this part really annoyed me. So they would do like a hometown murder, right?
Hmm.
And they ended up pulling a celebrity out of nowhere up on stage to talk about them and their story. When it's kind of like you have an audience full of like hundreds of people from Las Vegas. Why couldn't you pull someone from the hometown that had a story
Oh my
instead
God.
of a celebrity? So I was just kind of like, okay.
Oh, that's really irritating. Yeah, you have
Yeah.
like a bunch of stories sitting right in front of you and they're local. Like a
Yeah.
celebrity story you can find online. Like that's
Yeah.
easy.
I was just kind of like, okay. So since then, it just kind of left sadly a bad taste in my mouth because I really liked them a lot, like I
Hmm.
was obsessed with their show, but it just got to the point where it's like, uh, I'm okay. Like and then I found other shows like my favorite one that I've actually listened to from like the beginning. I listened to them like all the way to where they're at now, and they're like 160 something episodes. Excuse me. And so after My Favorite Murder, I found these guys and their Mile Higher podcast, and it's just like everything that I love all in one. And it's
Mm.
just so, they have all these different topics. It's not always about true crime, which they do a lot of true crime stuff too. But it's like, I don't know, I just love their vibe, their husband and wife, like they're my age. It's just kind of like a different vibe, and I jive with that a lot more, and I'm like a big fan of theirs till
Yeah,
this
you keep up
day.
with it. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you'd say that, um, what's the podcast called? The one that you were just talking about?
Mile Higher podcast.
Mile Higher. Okay. So,
Yes.
okay, cool. So what is it about that podcast that like really, hits home for you or like resonates? Is it the
Yeah.
process? Is it them, like their dynamic? Like what is it?
Yeah. I think it's all of it, honestly. I think it's a process of how they do things, because like they started out in their basement,
Oh,
and they started out just audio, and then they went into video, and then they have like a set. And then it's like, I think it's just a process of watching them from the very beginning to where they are now, because now they have a whole media production. Like they have their own podcast, and then the girl, her name's Kendall, she has a podcast with her cousin,
mhm.
and that one's a really cool, calm, chill podcast. It's called The Sesh, and I like that one too. And they talk about anything and everything. And then her husband has one with his brother, and it's called Lights Out, and it's a darker version of Mile Higher, where they talk about more like more true crime that's really dark.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just love seeing how they started from Mile Higher and then everything else. And what Mile Higher is, it's everything I love all in one. So it's like true crime, conspiracy theories, what else is there? There's so much. There's like topics of today. The one that I listened to recently was about a volcano that erupted in like 2019 that no one really knew about. And
Whoa.
it's like crazy, like hearing these stories and things. And yeah, they just have so much. Their main topics are what I really like. And so the fact that they have all of them in one, and I like their chemistry together. And I've followed her, her name's Kendall, so I followed her YouTube channel, which is a true crime YouTube channel, since like for a long time too. So that's how I found out about them. And yeah, so
Oh, that's super cool. It sounds like you go down rabbit holes. Like
I do.
like if you find something that piques your interest, you're like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. That's fascinating. And it's also interesting that um, you kind of like are drawn to like true crime
Mhm.
podcasts and stuff. So talk to me about that. Where do you think that stems from? I think that's super cool.
Yeah, that I don't know. I think that stems from the My Favorite Murder podcasts.
Hmm.
And I think from then I started to like dive deeper into it. But to be honest, I haven't listened to too much true crime like in a while, because when I was doing virtual assisting, there was one person I worked for about a month, and she had a very hard thing happen to her, which was kind of like a true crime case. And after trying to like, you know, learn more about her and listening to more of her stuff and her podcast and whatnot, like it was just too much for me. So I had to take a step back from it. And it's like, I haven't listened to true crime in like a long time, but it's just because, I think of what my boyfriend, like how he like is not at the job that he was doing anymore. That also played an effect with it too, to where I'm not like, too much into it. Like the stories and everything like that, like it's like real stories from people, and what my boyfriend went through, he had to deal with the aftermath of it all. So it's like, I think from all of that I kind of stepped away from the true crime aspect of it.
Hmm.
But it started with My Favorite Murder, and then it's like I will dabble into it like a little bit afterwards. But I think everything that happened in my life since then, I'm just kind of like, okay, I need a break from it.
Yeah, you
Does
kind of
that make sense?
step away for, yeah. So you'd say that was sort of like, when it comes to podcasting, that was probably like one of your first loves, but now it's
Yeah.
like because your boyfriend has, kind of gone through what he's gone through,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, let me step away from this. This is sort of like a saturated topic for me right now, which is
Yeah.
understandable because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to listen in on true crime all the time and then hear like, your boyfriend's stories about cleaning up
Mm-hmm.
the aftermath of these
Yeah.
situations and cases, that's sort of a lot.
Yeah, and he wouldn't tell me like the details behind each one because sometimes they're like really bad. And then sometimes it's like, he would tell me, just be like, "Hey, this is what I'm dealing with, so like, just so you know." And then it's like, I think because it hits so close to home in kind of like in a parallel type of way. Like it didn't happen to you, but it's close to you. And
Hmm.
it's just kind of like a whole different thing. Like even with the person that I worked with a little bit, like that was really close to home. That I was like, damn, okay.
Yeah.
And I just after working with her, like there was one day I just cried because I was like, I don't know if I could handle this.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So
I mean, I get it. I mean, if someone close to you is dealing with those certain situations, you kind of,
mhm,
there are times that you take it upon yourself and feel those same emotions.
mhm,
So
yeah.
that's completely understandable. And I mean, you're a podcast host and you produce podcasts. So you're, you're a natural listener,
Mhm,
and I've read in your bios that, you kind of started as an active listener
mhm.
and then that's kind of how you became the podcast host that you are now. So, can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like what you mean by being an active listener and sort of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so being an active listener to me is like the podcast that I, really love and really enjoy. I will listen to it and I would just kind of like I will listen to it and I'd listen to their stories and just kind of like resonate with them and what they say. And then another time too, it's like because of my work and what I do, I listen to so many podcasts. I listen to so many episodes that I work on. And you really have to listen to kind of get, to write show notes and to pick out audiogram sound bites and things like that. And so being an active listener, it's really kind of like understanding what the host is talking about and understanding the main message behind things. And if it resonates with you, then it will resonate with everyone else. And so part of my job with an agency is like I have to be an active listener to see what resonates with me so that I know for their audience it could resonate with them too. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You have to really tune in into what the needs are, right? When
Yeah.
you're talking to these agencies. Yeah, that makes complete sense. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious too, like what that process looks like for you, because you produce, you host, you know. Okay, so let me start off with when you as a podcast host are producing an episode, what does that process look like for you from start to finish?
Yeah. So when I'm producing and hosting my own show, I would like see someone that I've connected with and be like, hey, I like your podcast. Do you want to be on my show? And then they can say like yes or no, or if they say yes, then I could talk to them a little bit more. And it's funny because my show is like what's that podcast, so I talk to podcast hosts about their own show. And so in the beginning, it's like I did some research into them and into the people and into their podcast itself. And at the same time, it's like I didn't do too much because I wanted the conversation to be natural and I was wanting to show my guests that I'm curious about who they are and I want to know more about who they are so that it's like it's more authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like you can do as much research in the world, but for me, I like that authenticity of getting to know someone and getting to know their podcast and like why they started their podcast. And before we go on, I would send them like a list of questions that I'll ask. But even then, like I could go off topic, or depending on how conversation is, I could ask like a different question. And it just that connection of conversation really leads the show. And after everything is done, I say thank you. I ask them if they could provide like a bio and if they could provide a headshot. And so once they do that, I'll go through and I'll edit everything, and I'll pick out sound bites and I write show notes, and then I will input their headshots into graphic on Canva for their like, hey, this is a guest for this episode, and like let people know when it's gonna air. When it airs, I'll post like either an audiogram soundbite or a quote that they said,
Mm-hmm.
and I will send that to them as well so that they could share it on their platforms. Um, and yeah, it's, it could be a lot sometimes, but it's really fun. Um, the whole process of it all, especially the editing process. I became really addicted to editing, which I thought I wouldn't, but it's like one of my favorite things to do.
That's super cool. What is it about editing, the editing process that you really love?
I think it's the look of the sound waves and just kind of playing around with the sound waves on Audacity. And I love being able to, like we said, well, and we talked about perfectionism in my podcast episode, but
Mhm.
I think it's the perfectionism part where it's like I could kind of um, edit a podcast into perfectionism by like fading voice in and fading it out and getting rid of ums if ums need to be deleted. Um, if there's something I didn't like that I said or that someone else said, and we could like take it out. And I think I really like playing around with the I can't think of what it's called, the like the content part of it, like the speaking part of it, like how you can delete it and then put it somewhere else. Like just mixing and playing around with the audio is really fun for me. And taking an hour long episode and bringing it down to 30 minutes is really cool. And
Yeah.
adding music and um all the fun things too. So it's like I think it's just everything. And I think I like seeing the process of it, like seeing the sound waves and seeing it being deleted and seeing it being like copied and pasted and all of that. But I do, for 90% of the time, keep everything pretty normal and not too edited, because I'm a very big believer in, you know, I'm a very big believer in being real. So if you edit too much, it's like it's not too real, but it's, when I play around with it, that's when I get really fun and edit. I hope that makes sense.
No, it totally does. I mean, I like as I'm listening to your process, I'm kind of thinking about like what it's like to write a story. It's kind of like you start off with like a piece of clay and then you just kind of just add more or you take out and you shape it and reform it. And that's kind
Yeah.
of what it sounds like for you. Like, you're
Mhm.
talking about like the sound waves and taking things out
Yeah.
and adding things in, but like also keeping it natural, which I
Yeah.
completely understand. Like you want to keep the core and like
Yeah.
the authenticity and the juice of what something is, but
Yep.
enhance some things here and there. So I think
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, like a lot of the things I edit out is like filler words or trailed off sentences that don't go anywhere. That's what I mean by like content editing, where I'll take out, sentences that don't make sense to kind of have it from they said this, they trailed off, and then they said the same thing or they continued what they were saying in the beginning. So I'll take out that middle piece and it'll just kind of sound more like natural, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
as as you're talking about this, I'm learning too,
Yeah.
because I feel like editing is still something that I'm trying to explore a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great. I want to go back to some of your favorite podcasts. What are like your top three?
My top three. So let's see. My top three podcasts that I personally like. Is
Mhm.
that right? Mile Higher. I love them. Oh man. I might have to go into my like Spotify to look it up. Because it just changes all the time. But I love them. I like their sister podcast, The Sesh too. And then a fun one I'll throw in there is Lore. Have you heard of Lore before?
Oh, what is that about?
So it's kind of like so lore is about mysteries and folklore, and
Mhm.
it has all these crazy stories of like um let me pull it up because they were really really popular, and they actually I think have a show on Netflix with their podcast. But let's see, yeah, it's about dark historical tales. So they talk about mysterious creatures, tragic events, and unusual places that fill the pages of history. So
Ooh.
it's a bit darker, but it's really fun because it's like they they go deep into the history of folklore, and like they talk about the Loch Ness monster, and some of them if you know the movie Chucky, they talk about the doll, like that the main story with the doll and what happened there. Like they go deep with some of these crazy stories, which I really like. So
Whoa, okay. So I'm like definitely afraid of Chucky. Like for
me
some
too.
reason, yeah. For some reason that movie freaks me the hell out. So
Yeah.
what did they do you remember what they said about Chucky?
Let me see. I have to pull it up. It's a specific. Let me see if I can pull it up this way. Yeah, so it's based off of a true story,
Mhm.
about this little boy and his doll. So let me see if I could. Let's see.
Oh, it's a
Okay.
true story? Oh my gosh.
That's why it's like, oh my god, it's crazy.
That is crazy.
Um, Let me see. I'm trying to see. Is this it? Oh shoot, I have to like try and look it up for you because it talks about the family and like how this boy got a doll and then the doll started like there's stuff that happened. I'm like trying to look through it. I can't really remember the name of it because like the names are just kind of like the mountain or passing notes. Like they're very like you know
Oh yeah.
subtle, but it was one of the first few episodes, so I have to look it up for you and send it because it was really creepy and it was like, oh shit, like this is kind of like the story behind Chucky, and it's like damn.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's
Yeah,
super freaky. Yeah.
yeah.
I'll have to take a look at that. Um yeah. But anyways, I want to kind of like hop around here
Yeah.
um and kind of dive into like where your journey begins. I know that we had previously talked about it in a different conversation, but
Yeah.
you are you're born and raised in Las Vegas, right? You're
Mm.
a native.
No,
Okay.
I'm not a native. So I was born in Philly,
Hmm.
Packer Park, Philadelphia, and we moved a little bit growing up. So we moved to Georgia when I was like about 2, stayed there for a while, and then moved to Florida around like second, third grade, moved back to Georgia, and then 2004 moved out to Vegas. So when I lived in Vegas, I was here middle school, high school, and some of college, and I graduated here with my college. Yeah.
Wow, okay. So it sounds like you moved around a lot, sort of.
Yeah, so we moved around, let's see, mostly Georgia, Florida, and then here. So like 3 times we moved around when I was a kid. But yeah, and
Oh,
then when I was more like a adult, I moved around more often.
yeah.
But as a kid, yeah, definitely moved around like 3 times.
Oh,
So
that must have been. Do you remember like what it was like being a kid and like moving around often?
yeah, so I mostly remember it from when I moved from Georgia to um like I remember moving Georgia to Florida, and that one was kind of hard, but it was nice at the same time because I was able to make new friends, and we had a neighborhood with kids in it too, so it wasn't super hard. Um, and then I made friends at school, but then, we ended up moving back to Georgia as well. And I still had all my friends from Georgia then too. But the hardest part was moving from Georgia to Las Vegas because I wasn't close anymore, and it was before like the internet became really big. So
Mhm.
like I couldn't really connect, and I lost contact with a couple people until we got Facebook, and Facebook we were able to like uh become friends with our friends before, like Facebook friend them.
Mhm.
And before that though, it was just like really really hard because I was like, I can't, you know, being in Vegas, no one was out. No one was running around. Everyone was stuck inside at home because it was too hot. The only friends you had were school friends. And I wasn't used to that because I had friends at school, but like my main hub was the friends in my neighborhood that I'd run around with and play with and um, have a deeper connection with. And then, at the ones at school, it's like, okay, cool, hey. And then, you know, that type of thing. So like I had to change how I viewed friends in the school setting when I came up here, which was definitely interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so when you say interesting, I mean, is that a good interesting? Is it messy interesting? Bad interesting?
It was a bit messy at first, and it was hard just because like, I was a bit older this time. I was going into the 6th grade. And
Mhm.
so everyone that I went to school with all knew each other because they, went to school since 2nd grade and
Yeah,
all of that. And they were all friends already. And so for me, it's kind of like I was a new person and I was kind of weird. So just trying to get into like, trying to find friends that I could have good relationships with and whatnot was definitely different because I couldn't sometimes be like, hey, let's hang out like after school. It was always kind of like in school. And then like you'd have to be invited to go to places and things like that too with people. So it's just kind of like I think just the different like setting, if that makes sense. Because when I was in Georgia, I'd come home from school and like I knock on my friend's door and like, hey, let's go hang out. Or like I would even walk into um their house through their garage and be like, hey, is so and so here? Like it was
well,
just a completely different way of uh reconnecting after school. So
yeah, I can't, I mean, I imagine it's super different. But
yeah.
yeah, how crazy is that? It sounds like you had to integrate into a lot of like new environments in a short amount of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad though, because like as I grew up and I actually ended up moving schools myself in college. Like I went to 3 different colleges just trying to find like what I wanted to do.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, I had to, because of that experience, I learned faster how to make friends and how to kind of hold myself on my own, especially with college, moving to different colleges. So
Totally, totally.
yeah.
And were you moving around a lot because of like family? Was it just change of like jobs and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my dad had different changes of jobs. Like one of them was, so we it was a choice between Mississippi and Vegas.
Oh, I see.
when, yeah,
Yeah,
when we were in Georgia. And so my mom's like, we're going to Vegas.
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and so they've been here since 2004, haven't moved. Like we moved around the city, but not like out of the city.
Hmm.
Um and I've ended up moving more. So, but I always came back here. Here's kind of my main hub now.
Yeah, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like your home base, but you still want to like travel and explore a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are some places that you want to take a look at and explore and stuff?
Yeah, I want to go like everywhere. I haven't been to Texas yet. I want to go let's see. I'm trying to think. I want to go to Portland. I haven't been there at all. Um I want to explore places I haven't been to, and I've been to a lot of places. So it's hard to kind of without not having a map. It's like
It's
I
hard to
can't
know. Yeah,
Yeah, I
totally.
can't think of it in my head at the moment, but it's like I just want to travel and explore and go to places I've been to before and like see it at a different lens, you know?
Hmm.
And just kind of travel and yeah, so that's why I'm really doing this virtual assistant thing, or not virtual assistant, this virtual like online job world that I'm in, because I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to like, pick up and go, because at when I was as excuse me, when I was a receptionist, like I loved my coworkers, but I hated being in that, room where it was just me and I was just like, there was glass surrounding the whole front of the room. So like I was watching people walking by and cars going by and all that stuff. And I was just like, I want to be able to be outside. Like I want to be able to have different views of my workstation and,
Hmm.
not be stuck in the same room from like 8 to 5 every day. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
You want to move around and take your computer with you, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's great. How long have you been sort of in like the work, like virtual work world?
Yeah, so the pandemic actually really put a fire at my ass, if that's okay to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, because I was already looking into working virtually online before the pandemic happened. And I was like listening to the courses and working on them and things like that. And then once the pandemic hit, I really like went hard. And then I lost my job due to the pandemic. So then I really got into the virtual assisting world, and I was like, I don't like the virtual assisting stuff too much anymore. I want to niche down to podcast management. Um, so that's kind of like how that happened. And yeah, it was kind of more like it wasn't me making that decision. It was more like the world making that decision for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
You had like no control over that, but it sounds like it's been working out. I mean,
yeah.
you're talking about traveling and you have some places in mind, and
Yeah.
you also went on like a little van life
Yes.
thing recently. So talk to me about that. That's pretty
Oh
cool.
my goodness. Yeah. So my boyfriend Danny and I, when we first met, we were talking about how we wanted to live in a tiny home or like do van life or something, because that's just it's been my before him, it was been my like dream, to do van life, like I mentioned before, and travel, and I just thought it would be so fun. And so I would do like YouTube, Pinterest, all this stuff. And then I met him and he like expressed his same love and interest of it too. So for our 1 year anniversary, he surprised me with a van life trip. These amazing people, they're located in Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, and Colorado. And it's like Airbnb for van renting.
That's super
So
cool.
it's really cool. And they've been around for a while too. And I had to they're called native camper vans.
Hmm.
And it's really cool because like there's different levels of vans. If you're just two people, that's what we did. We had one for two people. There's one for four people, like a family, if you want to take your whole family with you. You could bring your dogs and stuff. So yeah, he surprised me with that, and it was a weekend trip. I wish it was longer. We might be able to do it for his birthday, um but I'm not too sure about that yet.
Hmm.
We're talking about it. Hopefully we could do it, and we
Yeah,
could do it
hopefully
longer than a weekend.
do it. Hopefully longer.
Yes. And if we do it longer than a weekend, it will be like a week or a week and a half or something like that.
Yeah,
Um
that would be super cool.
mhm. So it was his surprise for me, and it was kind of like our way of celebrating our 1 year. Like it came full circle from talking about it to actually doing it. And it was kind of like he helped make my dream come true with that. And it's like I know this is worth it. And I took photos of me working and things. So it's kind of like another way for me to manifest like, hey, this is possible. I can do this. And
Hmm.
it's a good reminder to have. So like really super fun. Definitely learned a lot from that trip. Um and yeah, we hope to do it again soon. So hopefully in a couple months we could do it again.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
When you say that you learned a lot from that trip, what sorts of things did you learn?
I learned about what type of things I needed to pack because I packed for like a week-long trip, but I didn't need all the stuff that we had.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. We learned how the layout is and if we liked the layout or not, which we did. There was like a lot of room like for storage that we were kind of surprised about.
Hmm.
We learned a lot about each other and just kind of like I'm sure he learned like how to drive it and things, and I learned kind of my movement with my body and like how to walk through the van when it's in motion because that took a lot. Um, we learned just like where to park and like we learned just everything. We like we learned more the realities of van life than I think we realized. Because then we realized if we like it, if we didn't like it, and if it's something that we could do
Like
either
long
long
term.
term, yeah, or have a van and take it on weekend trips or like long weekend trips. We're just trying to figure out more of where we want to go in the future when we decide to really invest in it. But we definitely learned a lot and we learned how we liked it and what we didn't like. And yeah.
Oh,
So
totally.
it's really worth it if you've been like dying to do van life and you want to see it, what
Yeah,
it's like.
yeah.
Definitely try and rent one out because it helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually really valuable information because I've been thinking about that. I've been wanting to do
Yeah.
van life for a while, and I think you're really smart for like doing sort of like a trial run, figuring
Exactly.
out if it even works. Because like, I mean, we all watch the YouTube videos that it
Yeah.
all looks freaking amazing and awesome, but sometimes like we look at things with rose-colored glasses and then we
Yeah.
actually are in the situation and it's like, no, I'll pass. I'm not
Exactly. And
yeah.
that's why we did it too, because it's like we wanted to see if we really liked it, if it's something we could do long term. Like we had to be creative with like they don't really talk about the bathroom. We had to be creative with that. And then I know people would like take showers at like gas stations and stuff. Like we didn't do that because it was just a weekend.
Mhm.
Um, but it was just kind of like you really get to see more of the behind the scenes than what people say or like what people show, like what you're talking about, like the rose colored glasses. And so, yeah, we definitely realized the type of stuff that if we did this, what we would like to have and what we wouldn't want to have, and kind of like the size of it and like everything. So it's definitely worth it to one, get that itch out. Like, I want to do this, I want to see what it's like, and two, to really see, like, can I do this?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
great. Okay, now I'm curious, like, how much did you all pay for, like, what did that cost look like for a trip like that?
Yeah. So, um, from what he told me, it was about like 1,300.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's, yeah, I guess that
It
makes sense. Yeah,
it's basically like a trip. Like if you were gonna go to a hotel, like a fancy hotel,
yeah.
it's kind of like that. But the beauty about this was we were able to wake up and look out the ocean, like right when we opened the doors, and
Mm.
it's like the ocean's right there. Like you can't beat that view. And
No.
um it's just kind of like you don't have to stay in like one hotel. Like you could hop around. You know what I mean? Like you could go to different areas. We went to 3 different places in California. So we were able to do that, or 4 places, but we were able to do that without having a commitment to go back to a hotel at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't beat that. You can't beat waking up and seeing like a bunch of beautiful trees and a waterfall
Yep.
on the beach. Like, there's
Yep.
nothing better than that.
So
Yeah.
we hope, like, we went to California. The next time we go on this trip, we hope to go to like Tahoe and up north, so like Tahoe, Utah area, and I think there's like another, like Reno, I think is where we wanted to go next. Just salt flats, that type of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
super exciting. I am inspired now.
Yes.
I'm gonna go rent a van for a little bit and see if I even like it. So,
Yeah, definitely do it. And I know there's other places that have it too. So you could even come back to Vegas and then drive, anywhere around Vegas if you wanted to, because that's the closest for you, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's
from
good.
the company I'm in, the company we did.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, again, we're jumping around here.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, go back to podcasting.
Yeah.
Uh, what is your favorite podcast episode that you've done for your personal podcast show?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what are your favorite moments or memories from that episode?
Yeah. So there's a lot of good podcast episodes that I've done. There's a lot of people I've interviewed. I interviewed 21 people. Well, 22.
Yeah.
But yeah, I interviewed a lot of people, and I think right now what resonates with me a lot was set to set to love or set to live. I have to, this is bad, I don't remember the name of it. um
Well, good. There's so many names and people, and yeah.
yeah, there's so many. I feel really bad about this because it's like the things that she said really resonated with me, and I was really like, yeah, this makes sense. And I just love it because it's like it made me realize more of my love for podcasting too, and it made me realize set to love. Yeah. um
That's a
and
great name too. That's awesome.
it is. And I talked to one of the co-hosts from there, and she really kind of made me realize too, like, how much I really love like podcasting, and more how everything that I did in my life led up to where I'm at now. And it's kind of like everything clicks, just if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I think I love that one because it's like I had a light bulb moment talking to her, and it's like, yes, this is exactly it. um but yeah, that was probably one of my favorites. And then all the other ones are so cool. Like, each one of them gave me amazing lessons to kind of like learn how to grow my podcast and learn how to, keep going, and gave me really good advice just starting out. And um yeah, I met amazing people too. And I met another one too, is the Inner Outer You podcast.
Hmm.
And it's with Christiane Charrier, and she was so awesome to talk to. And hers is all about like personal branding
Hmm.
with you, and like also kind of using psychology with your clothing, and like how you show up and what you wear, and how that could be part of your personal brand. So it's really interesting. Uh,
Whoa, that's
yeah,
fascinating.
it was really cool. And she's also I believe she's French. So her voice, her like accent is so unique and different than what I've heard.
Hmm.
And having my disability, I thought it was going to be hard to understand her, but I was able to understand her perfectly. So it was really cool, and that was a really cool episode. But yeah, all of them though are really inspiring, and just make me realize everyone starts somewhere, which is why I kind of wanted to implement more of the hows and the whys with my podcast. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and diving in. Yeah, that's super cool.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, you had mentioned something at the beginning of this episode. You said that you had this journey with it was an audio disability.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what that kind of looks like for you?
Yeah. So I have auditory processing disorder,
Okay.
and I've had this since I was 2 years old. Um, my parents thought that I might have been deaf, but I wasn't deaf. It's like I could hear. My hearing is actually perfect. It's more of the processings in my brain that kind of we rewire things differently.
Hmm.
So I like to explain it as dyslexia, but with hearing. So like if we're in a room full of people, and like at a loud restaurant, it might be hard for me to hear what you're saying,
Hmm.
like because everything else is all in with your voice, and like your voice is drowning in the background type of thing.
Hmm.
um it's different for everyone, but for me, I've experienced it throughout my whole entire life. School was a little bit hard at times, and then I didn't find out I had it until I was about 18. So,
Whoa. Wow.
yeah. So it's kind of crazy because since then I went I went to different colleges because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So I ended up trying to go to college for audiology so that I could like work with this and learn more about the science behind it and learn how to help other people with it. And then I just had a hard time passing the tests. So I kind of switched into doing psychology. So I graduated with a psych degree. But, it's kind of funny because I feel like I came into a full circle moment where, yes, I have this disability, but I'm also a podcast host and I work with audio like 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And I
That's
thought I
fascinating.
wanted, yeah, it's really weird, but I kind of see it as like a superpower in a way because like I hear things that other people might not hear or might not pick up on. So, yeah, it's kind of
Cool.
really wild to see like where I started with it and then how I kind of ended up still working in audio and how I ended up becoming a podcast producer, um, where everything is mainly audio in itself. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting and unique because you don't really hear that people, you don't really hear someone being a podcast manager or producer that has an auditory disability and doing a great job at what they do. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
totally.
really interesting.
It is, it is. And do you feel like when you learned that you had that at 18, was there a part of you that just like maybe felt even more called to get into podcasting and managing and all that stuff?
At 18, again, I didn't know anything about podcasting. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't on my radar at all.
at all. Yeah.
Yeah, cuz I didn't really do much with audio. I didn't really know anything about that either. Like I said, the most that I did was, of course, listen to music and YouTube, and like that was mainly it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it all came back to my sister though, with like finding those podcasts for me, and that's how I got really into podcasting. Because before I was like, they are doing podcasting. What? That's weird. Like I didn't even know what it was. Like
Yeah.
and it's like now it's like, oh, I love podcasting, and like it's not weird at all. Like it's a different medium, and it's so fun and connecting with all these people and networking and you know, um, yeah, it's just there's so much to it, and I didn't realize how much there was to it. And now it's like that's why when I go down the rabbit hole, I'm like, there's so much to learn.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's like, I mean, like what we've talked about, you sort of like go into rabbit hole mode, so it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And I think that's like, again, super unique that like here you are and it's like a disability with, a set like an audio sense. And that's,
Mhm.
and here you are kind of like combating that almost. Or it
Yeah.
feels that way at least. I don't
Mhm.
know if you feel that way, but that's what it
Yeah,
feels like.
I do, and I feel like too with working in audio it kind of helps my skill set increase way more as well because it's like, it's my job, so I realize it's my job and I have to like really focus and pay attention. Sometimes it's like I can't and I need like a break to step away for a day, but it's just like crazy because I didn't think I would ever be in something that's audio. And it's like, here I am.
Yeah, here you are. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's your work and it's what you do.
Yeah.
So you said that, when you went to a few colleges, like you were kind of
Hmm.
like exploring and stuff and trying to
Yeah.
figure things out. Can you talk to me about, what that process looked like? I mean, it
Hmm.
sounds like you had some time to kind of figure things out. What was it
Yeah.
before podcasting and audio?
Yeah. So I started off as a graphic design student because that's kind of what I thought I wanted to do. So I went to Weaver in Ogden, Utah,
Hmm.
and I was in the art program and stuff, but then I just didn't like being judged and graded for my art. It was, I couldn't handle the critiques. So and just everything in the classes were weird. I failed art class, so I had to retake it again.
Mm.
And it just, I wasn't driving with it. And so I realized I wanted to do something that helped people. And so I found Reno and I was like, I kind of want to go here because they had a program for speech pathology and audiology. And this was 2 years after doing art in Weaver State. And so I was like, I have this auditory processing disorder thing. Like, I want to learn more about it. I want to help other people with it. I want to help people. And so I went to Reno to study speech pathology and audiology. And
Mm.
when I was in Reno doing audiology classes, my teacher and I actually ended up doing, I was 22. And so I ended up getting another test to see if I still have auditory processing disorder. And I still do, I still have it. And it's still very with me today. So I was 2 years old when I first was diagnosed, and then I got re-diagnosed again at 22. So
Wow.
20 years, yeah.
Holy cow.
Um, and it's a legit thing. So it's like, yeah, like I have this disability. And so just working with her and getting all the accommodations for school and just trying to like my best to make it through. But I feel like I kind of fucked myself over in a way because I wasn't focused on school. I was more focused on friends at the time and socializing.
Mhm.
So I was like, I should have focused more on my studies. But then I just couldn't pass the tests. Like there were certain tests that I needed to take. I couldn't pass them. And no matter how many accommodations I had, no matter how much time I studied, it was just there's something always with like going back to retaining information is weird.
Mhm.
Like I can't retain everything I learned from the beginning of the year to what I learned at the end of the year. Always at
Yeah,
the end of the year was what I knew like more sharper than the beginning.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm the same way too. You just
Yeah.
over time you just lose some of that information and you have to like
Yeah.
do a refresher, right, in order to pass the test or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
And I was bad at that too. But yeah, so I ended up going from there. And then I had some hard times with like people socializing up there and excuse me, like the friends that I made. Excuse me.
No, you're good.
And so I just started to like get kind of sad and depressed a little bit. So I ended up moving back home and I went to Nevada State College at home. So I graduated there with a psych degree because again, I tried doing the speech pathology and audiology route, but I couldn't pass the math classes, like the praxis exams. Couldn't
Mhm.
pass those. I couldn't testing like I loved school, but the testing part was always hard. Um and then I ended up graduating with a psych degree. And after I graduated, I ended up in the office and then yeah, so and now I'm here. A
Yeah,
long story, but yeah.
no, I think it's good. It sounds like, you as a human were just trying to explore and figure it out and testing
Yeah.
different things and stuff and
Yeah.
it's cool because it brought you here, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. I definitely think the I took 90-day VA program. I took that and it introduced me to podcasting. So I think that kind of really like set the fire too, so to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super cool. So, with that said, um, I kind of I want to close it,
Yeah.
and I feel like we went through when we talked about like your journey and your process with podcasting, and we kind of reflected on some of your favorite moments too, like
Yeah.
with your personal podcast, which was really awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and we even talked about just what inspired the podcast, your
Mhm.
sister and the TV shows that you watched, like, and even some of the podcasts that you really loved, like with true crime and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, my final question for you is what's a piece of advice that you'd like to give to your past self, your present, and then your future self?
Yeah. my past self is to not be too hard on myself and to, not look at this disability as something that will hold you back, but instead will light you up, and that you can do whatever you want to do, um, even if it might seem hard at first. My present self is keep going and keep doing the thing and keep networking. And, you know, I found something that I love and that lights me up. And it's like, I haven't found anything like this in a while. So the fact that I'm still doing all of this like a year or so later, it's like I really want to keep going at this and keep seeing how far I could go and keep reaching like different goals and different dreams. And my future self is to remind keep reminding myself of the why I started this route and why I started podcasting and like the deeper meaning behind it, because people get lost in like download numbers and people get lost in the money aspect and the monetizing aspect of a podcast, but really it's like the biggest thing is the networks that you make, the people and friends that you make, and like the stories and the journey and the lessons that you learn too is always so important. So not to like forget about all of that, you know.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
No
Jules.
problem.
I
Thank
so
you.
appreciate you and you just sharing a bit about your story. Um, yeah, super wonderful. I'm so deeply inspired by what you're doing and kind of paving your own way, which that's what it feels like to me because I don't know anyone interviewing or talking to podcast hosts about their process and their journeys. So I think that's sort of like a cool little behind the scenes type
Yes,
thing that we've got going on.
exactly.
Yeah, so that's super cool. Um, so yeah, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Yes, thank you. I love being on the podcast.
Yeah.
People could find me on Instagram at it's Juliana Pedri.
Hmm.
I post podcasting things. I also make jewelry too, so I post about that stuff. Um, and just more of my life in general. And then my website is Juliana Pedri Podcasts. And it's still kind of like updating every once in a while, but that's where you could find more of my work things as well, like what I do. And yeah, those are the main platforms that I really reside in. So,
Yay! Thank you so much,
yay.
everyone, for tuning in. That was Jules. Thank you.